All right, Amari, what are we talking about today?
Whoa, 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 whoa. There's no Welcome to Film Crusade?
Oh, shit. Um, I completely forgot that part. Welcome to Film Crusade. What are we talking about, Amari?
All right, well, we're going to be talking about Pearl, which is the second, technically speaking, prequel, but it's the second film in the X franchise.
Yeah, Ty West's. I mean, I also really like The House of the Devil and Keepers, but I think X and Pearl have been his strongest work.
Yes, I haven't seen that one yet, but I did like X, and I did really like this a lot. Is it weird to say it is like a comfort movie for me?
Not necessarily,
You know what I mean? Like it feels like
because
because
it's
it is.
more character study than it is like an outright slasher. Like X was a slasher that homaged old school slashers like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Hills Have Eyes. And this was a bit more like, yeah, there's still slasher elements here because it's about the villain of the first film's um like backstory. But it was
Yeah.
more about her character and why, well, not necessarily why she became how she became,
Well, it's
because
kind of like that.
at the start, like, what pleasantly surprised me, I guess, is yes, this is how she became what she became in X, but she was kind of like, it's already there from the start, because usually you have a movie where you're like, oh, these are the events that caused her to, but it seems like no, she's kind of always been this way because of things outside of both of these movies, because of the way her family raised her, because of all these aspects that ended up culminating into this violent personality.
Yeah, I would say
Um,
it's like almost like I guess the days leading up to when she like finally snapped.
yeah,
Like,
like
yeah,
she snaps in the film, and that's what it's building to. But it's she's already kind of lost it before the movie has even started, because very early on you can tell there's something a little off about her, um,
well, I
from the
think
very start.
I think the part of this which became like a comfort movie is just because the way like everything about it, just because of
The
like
Technicolor presentation,
the
or
technicolor presentation,
probably AI
yeah,
upscaled Technicolor stuff, but
which is very Wizard of Oz and Disney-esque, mostly Wizard of Oz.
yeah,
But
with
and
the
it's
scarecrow too.
with the
Um,
scarecrow too, which that scene, I will tell you, that scene is very, yeah, that scene's
it was very
I,
uneasy for me in my seat watching that personally. Kind of
well,
like a different scene in X with Pearl and Howard. It kind of gave off the same kind of I shouldn't be watching this vibe.
I guess for me, it was just that, like, it was just that scene particularly. I was like, oh, that's right, this is part of the X franchise. Like, I forgot for a second that I was watching a movie that is technically, it's in this, well, I guess, gonna be
New
trilogy.
universe
Yeah,
that might be a trilogy, might be
not might be a little bit more because I
more.
know because there is a post credit scene that does tease, and the video's already been out there, even which is Maxine with
Yeah.
three X's. Um,
Since I had seen it online, I did not stay to watch it.
oh, I did.
Uh,
I just wanted to see on the bigger screen. I was just like, this is nice.
like, okay, I saw it on YouTube. So
Well, I mean, it did come out on YouTube.
because I know with X they said the Pearl thing,
Yeah,
and they didn't release it online. They were like,
yeah,
it's
they never
only for
did.
those in theaters, so go
Yeah,
see it in theaters. Stay after the credits.
yeah.
Here they had released it online, so I was like, I don't really feel the need to stay. And my nose was all stuffy, and I was like, I need to get home. So
Oh, I think the standard honestly for all three of well, what's going to be all three of these movies is going to be, and it's particularly this one is Mia Goth,
yeah,
which gives a like a
her
tremendous
work in
performance.
this and X, like, it's one of those like probably top 10 performances of the year.
Yeah,
Like
and
those two movies combined, because what she does in X with the dual role and having to
yeah,
deal with all the
and
makeup.
I think with this one too, when I heard about, which I wish I did hear about it, but like everybody was just already raving about it, which was her 6+ minute monologue,
Yeah, it was. I
which
think the
is
whole scene was like 10 minutes, but you had like the
yeah,
additions at the beginning, but then there was like the 6 minute shot of her. mainly
which
talking and
which was just,
spoken it back to the
I
audience.
like got sucked in there. Like,
Yeah,
because Jesus, did she do such a great job in that? And there's this tiny gesture that not tiny, but she does this gesture towards the end of her monologue. I think that was just perfect.
yeah,
And the fact that they put a monologue in a horror film is really nice, like a movie, not just like, I know
yeah,
Midnight Mass has been, came out, and it was basically, famous for its monologues, but just knowing a film was able just to sit down and just be like, oh, we're gonna have like a six plus
yeah. In
minute.
a Netflix series, it's usually more excusable because you're like you have all these this extra time for character development, for monologues, and some people nitpick with the Flanagan shows, but
I thought Midnight Mass
movie
was
you
great.
rarely do that. You're like, this is a movie. You don't have a character talk for minutes at a time without cutting away,
Yeah,
and it works, and she crushes it.
yeah, and I think it's because of the fact that, like, I think a studio movie, like a more or less studio movie, would have been, they wouldn't have added that. But the fact that
Yeah,
A24 is, A24,
and both this and X had relatively low budgets,
yeah.
which I was kind of surprised about. Of like, holy cow, that look, because I think each of them was made for like a million a piece.
And also, this was made,
So,
like, they filmed this directly after they finished filming X. Like,
yeah,
they wrapped up X,
because
and then,
they had a break in the filming of X because of the quarantine and pandemic, and
yeah,
they were like, oh, we're really fascinated by the character of Pearl. Why don't we write a script about her story? And then let's talk to A24 about greenlighting that. And they're like, oh, sure, like a prequel
yeah, they
that
were
they
really
could.
fast about it too. They were like within
So
like
they
the,
wrote it in quarantine together, Ty West and Mia Goth, who,
I think
co-wrote
this is
the
her
film.
first writing credit, if I'm
Yeah.
not, yeah, for screenwriting, which is great, honestly. I
And
mean,
I think her first producer credit as well.
I did notice that.
Um,
um,
so yeah, and they work really well together. I think Maxine, the third one, that's going to send her on her other character from X. If that's true, if that could be the concluding chapter, that would be really like, I'm curious about it because I know it's 1980s and video store and
yeah, which I think I think I've read that he is going to be kind of delving into like the when it's like home release movies and VHSs and stuff, which would be really interesting.
yeah, because that's the golden age of horror. There
Yeah,
was the 80s when people were able to go to Blockbuster and rent like six horror movies and change their, and these movies are kind of about how movies impact audiences or porn impacts the industry, like weird kind of art and how people react to it. So having the video store commentary, I think, could be really cool for me as someone who spent the first 10 years of my life with blockbusters and family videos and all that.
what's really cool about this one too is the fact that, because X is more like kind of, is more or less kind of talking about sex. It's just
Yeah,
the porn industry and whatnot, and because the 70s and stuff. But when
the
you come
golden
with,
age of
yeah,
porn.
yeah, basically. But when
Yes.
it comes to, that's actually a sentence. Um,
Yep.
but when it comes to Pearl, and my mind for a second was like, oh, they're gonna be talking about, more about like maybe like porn back then, like, like, because it is set in 1918, like in the, during World War I.
Yeah, and there were stag films like the one they
Yeah,
show in the film.
and they do touch upon it, but with this one, it's like they're not really focusing too much on that. It's more the coming of
Well,
age.
because it was still very underground.
Yeah,
So the small mention we get is kind of how little
mhm.
people really knew about it.
Which I love the fact that they decided to mainly just, what you were saying before, they were talking about like it's a character study on Pearl. So you're really
Yeah,
just following like basically her upbringings and her, it's like a coming of age movie, but like a
her
horror.
relationship with her parents and
Yeah. Which I mean, which all that, I mean, the fact that all this was done directly after filming X, and you just see how, for the most part, how
here's the
bigger
same
bigger,
set, but
yeah,
it's
like
dressed up differently.
the scales a
Um,
little bit, like there's a more of an ensemble cast,
yeah,
more or less with But with this one, they were
with
just like,
X, yeah. And
yeah,
then
with
this is
X.
like singular in its
Hmm.
focus. And then there's the people on the outside that are kind of like impacting Pearl.
Yeah,
Um,
which is just great. I mean, honestly speaking, and they used
that's
from
probably my favorite final shot of the year,
oh, that's a great final shot. There,
which it
there's
was
just
funny because the people in my audience were like, they didn't know how to react. So they just started laughing
no
throughout it.
same, no same.
Um,
It kept on going, and it
yeah.
just kept going, which was great because I was like, oh shit, you're still going. You're going for quite a couple, but then it gets sad. Like when you if you like, we're
Yeah,
still laughing,
because
guys.
the
Mhm.
yeah, I'm trying to be vague, but
Because what
I
it gets kind
mean,
of sad towards the end. Yeah. It
it's
is.
like that is the direct line into, oh, now you can rewatch X.
Yeah, it's funny because it's funny that they really just pulled a Godfather on us. You get the first one, and you get the second. I mean, I know the second one's divided in half, but like we just take out the other half,
Yeah,
which is like present day and so. But mostly the Godfather Part Two focuses more on the upbringings. Um,
of Vito and
yeah, and
how,
Vito. I was about to say someone else's name, but I'm like 20. I'm 95% sure it's Vito. But the film mostly focuses on Vito's upbringing to when you see him as Marlon Brando, in the first movie. Where this
and
one,
then he's off screen during, oh gosh, man.
which one?
Just thinking about how the final scene is they're waiting for their father for
Oh
his
yeah, The Godfather.
birthday, and
Mm-hmm. That's great.
man, that
I mean, with going like with, I don't want to get too sidetracked with the Godfather Part Two because we can talk about that for like hours.
yeah.
But what's
I
crazy
need
with
to
both.
rewatch Godfather Part Two. I already rewatched Godfather a few months ago and was like, man, that
I
still is
just
good.
I just remember too the music in Pearl. I fucking love the score in Pearl.
Yeah, I preferred some bits of the X score over the overarching stuff with Pearl, but I did really like the main theme that they kept kind of doing,
Yeah,
which is
no,
in the trailer too,
mhm.
obviously. Um,
Well, it's
kind of
just
felt Disney.
yeah, that's what I loved about it because that's a weird thing about this movie is the fact that like I sat down like obviously like I didn't get scared but
Yeah.
like it's just nice to just I was just like this is nice and I'm like this is a nice weird comfort movie I can just sit down and watch again and the music definitely did help out because it's very Disney-esque and it's very whimsical and it's just so damn good and it's just a lot of just there's just so much great um imagery too and a great use of just there's this great one shot I do love. It happens after the monologue and it's like a long take and I think it's really well
Yeah.
done. I think you know what I'm talking about. It's outside. It's just really just
Yeah, it's a big,
the way that all that's staged is so damn great.
it also feels a little touch of Shining with that.
Mhm.
Um,
But I think a lot of
but you see it rather than
yeah,
have
you
it
see.
be a jump moment like in The
Mhm.
Shining.
It's just
Trying to be
great.
vague.
I think also with I don't know. I just there's just so much to love about this movie, and it's the fact that it just feels so different from X, you know, because
Yeah.
X is very much it's a straight slasher, and this one just there's just so many moments that just it
And
just
they took the Spanish flu of the time
mhm.
and they're like, imbued it. Oh yeah, people wearing masks and trying not to get sick, and that fuels a lot of the paranoia for Pearl's family, and kind
Yeah,
of is the isolation is kind of one of the things
that's
that is getting to Pearl. So
yeah
it
that's
ends
it
up
that's
like using real world stuff, like real history and and contemporary stuff to like, oh, this could be motivation in a way of like how this kind of stuff happens to people.
yeah, and I think it's great that they the commentary too because both Pearl and X have made me like think about um the commentary that they're trying to say about
Getting old
there's getting
and
old. There's just also just
following your dreams can sometimes lead to disappointment.
yeah, also just
Um,
this. I think at least with X, there was like talks about what sex means to certain people.
yeah,
I think it's really
I think
fascinating. And then
this
Pearl,
one had the more personal one to me, even though I probably prefer X as a film. This one was like, oh yeah, I understand not the murderous intent, obviously, but I understand that like risking everything on this one audition and like parents kind of being like, you shouldn't you shouldn't stake everything on this. Um, because like it is about you can't get what you want most of the time in this life and you have to like settle for what you have and make the best of it, the whole kind of theme
Yeah.
of said movie. And then, I mean, making the best of it by murdering a bunch of people is not necessarily, but that kind of currently in this mode of waiting for the dreams that I want to follow and like trying to build up security before I follow said dreams. It like kind of was uncomfortable for me to watch parts of this of like remembering old parts of myself back when we were in high school together and how upsetting it was with certain things that went on there and then like
Well, yeah, because it's
and
like the
also reminding me of how I did fall out of love with acting and performing because it's such a judgmental lifestyle, um, where you're constantly like all you can bring to acting is yourself. You can't change yourself. They want this image and then your image is something completely different and your image is still valuable but it's not what they want, and that crushes you because you're like all I have is me.
yeah,
Anyhow,
you make
it is really like really got deep for me in
I
ways that
didn't
I'm
even
like
think about
I
that.
don't love every bit of this film,
I think in the
but
back
I do love that it kind of shows that.
I think in the back of my mind I was thinking about that, but the fact you brought that up to the forefront, I was like, oh yeah, that does suck. But yeah.
And there's also just like um parents of the same gender are usually more critical of the dream, and like we're gonna probably experience that again with Fablemans of like the son and the father's like find something practical, find something that you can actually like save up some money and like that hobby's nice and all, but it's a hobby, and here it's outright that the hobby is a waste of time. And the parent's opinion, or one of the parent that talks, the mom, because the dad, I mean, we don't know his point of view on the world really because he's like
No,
infirmed and kind of just
he's
like
a yeah, he's just not
he doesn't speak. It's a
yeah.
very good performance that is mainly like in small face movements and all that kind of stuff, but you can't really gather his relationship with Pearl, which is good because it leaves things kind of unspoken and you could be like maybe he was really rough with Pearl and the mother was like constantly defending Pearl, and then like when he got sick he had to rely on Pearl and Pearl had to like help him. Anyway, lots of deep stuff with both of these movies. Where like X, you had kind of warned me that I would be thinking about a lot of stuff. This one I had heard, oh yeah, it's just fun. So when I went to see it and was like, wow, okay,
Yeah.
didn't expect any of that. And then there's the Wee Marie call forward as well. There's lots of call forwards to X that
Mhm.
are not overt, but really well done. Pearl's whole dream of wanting to be a dancer, and of course, things that happen with Pearl and X and dancing. Um, Also, Pearl being very obsessed with sex, but also seeing it as morally depraved, kind of based around her upbringing, and then lots of back and forth ripple effects of like, oh yeah, we have this from the X script that you wrote. What if we echoed that in
Yeah,
some way in
they wrote it
Pearl?
more as like I think Ty West. I keep wanting to say T.I. West, but Ty
Yeah,
West was like I think he wrote it more as like serving as backstory, but then I think he kind of him and Mia Goth, I think, kind of loved the idea of oh, if we made it into a film. And the fact that all that is the commentary of all that is even put into and it's squeezed so nicely within Pearl is
yeah,
just is really really great and really really strong honestly. And it's just like yeah, there's a lot of things about which I like the fact that this one was more about like character study because you are you know you're with Pearl all scenes, and you're basically seeing the world through her eyes, and it's just
Yeah,
you can't
you
help
really
you can't help but
never
feel
leave her perspective.
yeah, it's a lot, and it's a lot like the Batman, where you're just with Batman every single scene. There's no scene where it's like outside of him. And with Pearl, it's so sad though because you realize that because you see this woman because just from the first shot, honestly, the opening shot, you kind of everything's
Which
kind of
feels a
spelled out.
little like, and you're gonna hate me for this, a little like a John Ford.
Look, I mean, if the fact, I mean, if they're taking inspiration from the Wizard of Oz and all these old
Yeah, they're taking a
Technicolor,
lot of 1930s and 40s
yeah,
inspiration for
then
sure.
I mean, by all means and stuff. I gotta watch more John Ford movies.
Yeah, well, it felt like, the opening of the door, kind of like the Searchers. It
oh,
felt kind of, and then you had the wipes that were very characteristic.
dude, I was so happy to see the
Both of
wipes.
them, both of these movies take on
Dude,
the style of the old movies,
dude, the wipes, bro. I was so happy. I saw one wipe. I was like, holy shit, there's a wipe.
yeah. Which, of
um,
course, most people think wipes and they think Star Wars or something, but
yeah,
that was just what life was like in the 30s and 40s with a lot of movies. And Kurosawa and all these great directors used wipes all the time. And
yeah.
now
The transitions were really nice too. There's
they're
like a
not
lot.
there anymore, usually
No.
outside of Star Wars. They're still in Star Wars. So when you see a wipe outside of Star Wars, you're like, oh, look at that.
Well, but it's just like you just kind of feel bad for you do feel bad for Pearl.
Yeah.
I mean,
You
you can
don't
understand.
justify the
No,
murder necessarily, but you look at her
you
and you're like, this is a sad
yeah,
life, and it's not fun to have a mother who looks at you and hates you, that kind of thing. It's
yeah,
not.
and it's honestly just sad because you just kind of there is a character in here that does kind of he's kind of like just like a 2 second thing where he kind of takes on the audience's perspective where he's just kind of like oh and
Yeah.
there's a quick look there's this quick look that he gives and you're just like oh yeah you're like yeah no you
Well, it's the thing. I think both of them are kind of also like they're about things that are sometimes unavoidable, like how this one's kind of looking at Pearl's mental illness, and
Mhm.
the first one's kind of looking at aging
Yeah
and
I
things
mean
that are unavoidable
yeah
for
and
people.
it's honestly just like because when you watch both of them, which is kind of it's kind of sad actually that you we won't I mean unless they pull out something in Maxine, but I'm thinking Pearl as a character is for the
Well,
most part
I'm sure Pearl as a character is going to haunt Maxine in the
yeah
events of the third film.
it's just it's
Um,
nice that we get like a whole backstory basically of the serial killer like this
yeah,
killer and but it's so interesting because you see this like her young versus when she's old and
you still
then
got to see House of the Devil too,
mm,
because I do like Pearl and X the most out of his filmography. Like they're kind of right
yeah
next to each other. Usually prefer X right now,
I
although
prefer
Pearl is the
X by
one.
like a hair. Like it's like a
Yeah,
hair though, but I gotta rewatch X again. But it
I
doesn't mean
think X is like the style of X is more appealing to me because I like those 70s grimy horror movies where the
Mhm.
Technicolor stuff worked for me. And it was, I mean, it wasn't fully a horror movie. I constantly want to say, yeah, like it's the backstory of a horror movie, but it's not really a horror itself. Like the
Mhm.
last half hour, it gets to that, I guess.
I
But
think I
it's,
think I prefer really just not prefer, but I think I just love the like not the commentary, but like just getting to see this character study on Pearl versus you do get some stuff in X, some commentary stuff. I mean, you get I
yeah,
mean it's littered throughout the whole thing, but you do but for me it just boils down to one scene in X when they're all sitting and they're talking.
yeah,
Um,
there's only really one conversation in
yeah,
X
which
happening.
does which just piqued my interest. But then with Pearl's like the whole movie, you are just dissecting this character, and I think that's really really cool. And I think it's also kind of nice that and I think I like the fact that Ti West, sorry, fuck, Ty West,
High
Jesus,
West, yeah.
Ty West wants he does what you were saying before. He does litter things that happen in X or certain things you do see in X in this. He doesn't kind of he doesn't force it. Like he's just kind of like, oh yeah, this happened. Okay, anyway, we're gonna move on now. It's like,
Yeah,
here's your thing. We're gonna focus
here's
on
your bloodied corpse real quick, and then
yeah.
okay, you've seen it, you don't have to linger on it. Um,
Just know that it happened. But it's just I don't know. I think also it does go in directions that throughout the whole movie actually goes in a direction I was not expecting. Because you do know the end goal. And I think a lot of people
yeah,
have said, yeah,
I
like a lot
think
of people
most people know that
what
people
happens.
gonna die.
Yeah.
Because it's a X prequel, and if you saw X, you know it's a slasher where people gonna die. And Pearl is very
Yeah.
similar in that sense, but all the character work is very like
Mhm.
it's an unexpected approach because you're like spending so much time with her as a character, seeing the world through her eyes that when the slasher movie comes, it comes very quickly, and you're like, oh, right, yeah, I knew this was gonna happen probably, but not like this
I
because
think
it's
yeah.
very quick and tragic how it
It's also just nice the fact that like
runs it
you
down.
can also like identify her Pearl as a character because she does daydream a lot and like kind of imagines certain things. Like she imagines stories, and I think that's really much of a relatable thing. I think everybody does at one point to like escape the harshness of reality. You do
Yeah.
end up going into your imagination. But I like the fact that you get maybe a couple moments where it becomes surreal, but for the most part, which I think is
Oh, you know what was really good
what's up.
was, to not say too much, but the lullaby bit. That was really good. That was that was like really good. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking that, but then I also was kind of like, I know we're near the end of the movie, so I kind of want to, because I
Oh, I know
heard
what you're
the
talking
end
about.
credits were amazing.
I know what you're talking about. I know exactly
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Yeah, that was a good scene. But I like the fact that like you're mostly like there's a again going back to the scarecrow scene, you would think it's gonna be something else. Like you think it's gonna go surreal, but I like the fact that it plays it off real. Like it's like what you're
Yeah, it
actually
doesn't
seeing.
exist outside of reality. It
Yeah,
just exists in her perception of it,
yeah, and
which
I
is
think
very strange to say the least.
because you expect one thing with the scarecrow to like suddenly they're gonna do something like this with this or that, but really it's just kind of like if someone outside was just looking at this person doing the things that they're doing, and you're like, oh,
What's
like
funny is, and this is going to be like a vague kind of thing, is when you finally see the young Howard, you're like, man,
yeah, you feel
you do
bad.
not age well, my friend. Like,
You do. I forgot. You do see pictures of him throughout it, and I
yeah,
think
you see
yeah,
pictures and then you see him
yeah. You do
for
see.
real at near the very end, and because Howard is also an ex, and ooh, he is
Which I think which
hideous to look at in that
that
film.
that right there is really interesting. The way the movie decide where the movie decides to end is so smart because then you're left to think, fuck, this is like because Pearl. I mean, sorry, X takes place decades after the
Yeah,
events of Pearl, and you're like, Jesus
how long
Christ.
can you keep that up? Um,
It's like, fuck, that's so sad. Like that's just that, which is also a nice lead into the fact of age. Like, because you see
yeah,
Pearl at the start of X, and you're like, and you see this movie, and you're just kind of like the things that happen and the things that they say in Pearl that and the fact that they become a reality in X is just also just adds into the tragedy of this character.
yeah, it's
Which you
almost like
don't condone
Pearl.
the violence, but you're just like, fuck.
Yeah, it's almost like Pearl as a character and her story, or just like the Mia Goth characters in general with this franchise. It's like kind of almost commentary on America itself,
Oh yeah.
because there's a little bit of X with the whole like far right, well not far right, but very conservative pastor on Pearl and Howard's TV, and how that ties in with Maxine near the very end as well.
Mm.
Um, and it's very much of like, oh yeah, the second something comes up that is like that is morally wrong to strong Christians, like it pops up, and then someone immediately pops up and is like, that is gross, that is immoral, that is inappropriate. And because of that, that breeds more hatred rather than just, okay, I don't like it, but you live your life, I'll live in my corner, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I think
So then that could. poke at the Pearl thing a bit more with X and like her constantly watching that on TV. And she has a TV in her home eventually. Like she gets to see a bit of the outside world, but mostly what she watches is this man shouting fire and brimstone of how our daughters are being taken from us and turned into little whores and all that crap.
Yeah. I think also, I think I forgot to
So
mention,
she becomes almost like her mother.
yeah. I forgot to also mention that the audition scene you're talking about, there was an audition scene towards
Yeah,
this, and that is
yeah.
so damn well done. Like the whole sequence itself is well done, and it's
The
very much like
aftermath is
the
really well done.
aftermath is just so painful to watch. Because Mia
Yeah,
Goth just like again, she does such a great job, and you're just like, fuck, like like Jesus, like the screams are so damn
like
good.
how that audition's going to end. You watch the movie and you hear about the audition and you know what's going to happen.
Just she just does such a great
But
job, and I really wish I see her in more stuff because I've seen her so far in Suspiria and
I need to rewatch Suspiria, obviously,
just
because Bones
in
and All is
X
coming out.
and Pearl. I know she's been in a bunch of other movies.
She was in
Uh,
A Cure for
for
Wellness.
wellness.
Need to rewatch that, even though it
Uh,
has one of my least favorite people starring in it. Um,
but I do
would be a great movie if someone else played that part.
I do.
It's like what's it called? Untouchables, where
No,
I
no,
really like that
no,
movie, but the lead actor,
dude. Kevin Costner is fine in The Untouchables. You are bugging. He is fine. He is the everyman in that movie. That's the point.
but did the everyman performance have to be so bland?
It wasn't bland. He was good.
See, I'm white. I know something about blandness. And Kevin Costner in that movie is bland.
Listen, bro. You see him as this. You see him as just a regular Nutri-Green bar. I see the flavors in this Nutri-Green bar.
There have been two movies I have liked Kevin Costner in.
Was it Man of Steel?
No, not Man of Steel. I
I
still
thought you
don't
were.
like him in Man
I
of
thought you
Steel.
were
I
about.
still think that stuff's
I
stupid in
thought you
Man
were
of
about
Steel.
to. I thought you were about to say
But
there's three movies.
the Snyder Cut, I think the way he's implemented in that is good.
Yeah,
Um, and actually made me emotional. And Molly's Game is like
really interesting.
scene near the end is I think
Oh
good.
no, that scene near the end is good. No, it's a good scene.
But otherwise, I've maybe I'm watching the wrong movies, but I've never been a Costner fan.
At least the
So
Untouchables, bro. God,
well, I really like the Untouchables, except his performance and the performance of the person who plays his wife. She's also not great, but she has to work with Kevin Costner in all her scenes. So, is it really her fault, or is it?
did the chicken or the egg come first? Who's to say? It's a fucking
It
egg.
is one of
Anyway,
those things, really, because because when I rewatched it, I was like, oh yeah, I love everything about this except Kevin Costner. But I rewatched it, and I was like, actually, the person who plays his wife is also not
oh
great.
my
But
god.
then I had to think,
The Untouchables is
maybe
such a great movie. This guy is slandering it.
it is a
Anyway,
great film. It is a great film. It just suffers a little bit in that
uh,
department.
but I think I am very excited to see Maxine. And I think so far these two movies have been so great, and they've been doing such
Yeah,
a great job with the horror genre. And I love the fact that he's bringing back the slasher kind of. He's basically bringing back the
yeah,
slasher essentially.
yeah.
Um,
I'd say so.
and he's doing
Uh,
in Ty
I
West is
mean,
doing
there's
a great
still
job with it.
crappy slashers every year, but he's bringing back a good
No, he's
slasher.
doing the
Kind
good
of.
ones that are filled with such interesting. Like I love the commentary that he does in both these movies. He does such a great job of just it doesn't feel forced, which I love because he's just kind of like this is the time period it exists in, and here are the things.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of X until you like sent me the trailer of like, oh yeah, watch that trailer. Um, but I remember being like, oh, another Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake that happened, and I watched it with my brother and his girlfriend, and I mean, it was better than expected, but it was not like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. It was very like if they didn't have that title, I would have probably bumped it up half a star or something. Because I don't think it works as a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie because it knows stylistic similarity. But then I saw the X trailer. I was like, this feels like more of a update on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre formula than the actual Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake that, or not remake, reboot or requel 40 Halloween 2018 for Texas Chainsaw Massacre fans. Better than Halloween 2018 in my opinion.
Oh, which one? Texas Chainsaw Massacre?
Yeah, the
Oh, the new one. Oh, I
2022
didn't even see the
Texas.
new one.
Yeah, well, you
I
haven't.
still have to finish the old one.
Yeah,
I have to finish the old one, but I did remember
we'll do
enjoying
that
it.
for Halloween or
It was
something.
so late at night. I was with cousins. We were watching it, and then it was just like it was like 3 in the morning, and we were like slowly falling asleep. And I was like, damn it! I was like, this is so good though, and I'm just so
Yeah,
tired.
it really. So, and then X, when you actually watch it, it's like, yeah, it's taking those old 70s movies and like giving them a fresh kind of thing of like, here's the stars of today, here's like competent craft going on, and still using some of that stylistic stuff of like split screen and fuzzy frames and all that kind of stuff, where the digital sheen on the Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboot, remake, sequel 40 years later is it just looks like every other horror movie,
Yeah,
and it it
which
doesn't feel like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. It just doesn't feel like it.
you just reminded me is that I remember watching the text. I remember watching that trailer, and I was like, the comedy's not working.
Yeah,
Pearl and X have such great comedic timing. Like when it needs to be
yeah.
funny, it's so fucking funny.
Pearl
And
and X are very good films. They're not my favorite horror stuff of the year, but they're
I think
still very good.
they're climbing up there for me because I'm like, this is really fucking good. And I was like, and I can't remember, like, you sure you got your Ari Aster stuff and your Jordan Peele things, but I think there's something so special about what Ty West is doing with both these movies in the same year.
Yeah, and
Like, it's
I
just
think Ty West's
great.
creative statement is looking back at old movies and like remixing them for the new crowd.
Yeah, and I
House of the Devil feels very much like a Rosemary's Baby kind of thing for the late 2000s, early 2010s. It feels like something that you'd order pizza with friends and you'd watch that. Um, and it has a slow crawl and then like a huge explosion in the last 30 minutes.
great.
And he's really great at that, of like taking that old school stuff, making it new.
But yeah, no, Pearl,
But the
so
next
damn
movie
great.
we're talking about,
But oh yeah, but Pearl, hell yeah,
yeah,
so damn good.